The recent RBS data shows the retail inflation in under control, while the exact same central bank shows something opposite. The national household debt rose from 5% in January 2025 to 45% in June 2026. All of this were happening while ordering something as simple as food is getting more expensive. While there have been a lot of debates and discussions about inflation being the primary culprit here, data shows that the people are struggling to manage their own money. At first, as this could be mistaken as just a coincidence, in January 2020, India's competition regulator looked at the online food delivery market and found three large players dominating the whole market and imposing unfair rules on the restaurants by using consumers' data, or so says the CCR's 26th page of its 38-page report. In simpler words, for a regular consumer, there is no chances of prices coming down. But this is not all. Daily conveniences like food delivery is the place where we can see the problem clearly, which could tell us why your money feels tighter even when inflation is under control. One small fee doesn't look like much, but when the same convenience becomes something you pay for it repeatedly, it starts looking a lot like an undeclared tax on your everyday spending. In this video, we will understand the myths of inflation, how your wealth is unequally being eroded, how it is actually engineered into existence, and by whom, the origins and the beneficiaries of this savings crisis to help better understand the current situation. Since the pandemic in 2020, followed by the Russia-Ukraine war, and now the ongoing West Asian conflict, India and much of the world experienced inflation left, right, and center. Regulators at large, including the central banks, tried bringing the inflation down, and they were successful, I might admit. October 2025 saw India's retail inflation about 0.25%. In the first quarter of FY27, inflation stabilized up to 4.4%, which is the safe range. So, on paper, this should be good news. But that's not what people are saying. In January 2025, the RBI took a household survey of what people thought current inflation was. While the median answer was 8.3%, 3-month projection showed 9.2%, 1 year from then 10.2%. But the actual urban consumer price index at that time was only 3.4%. That's not a small disagreement. That's a completely different picture of the entire economy. And this is where I think the official number starts becoming less useful to the person actually paying the bills. After all, people incurred those numbers by looking at what things costed before and comparing it with current prices and not calculating the consumer price index all the time. People who thought inflation was much higher started looking for more income, bought things earlier, used savings, and became more cautious with money. This is generally something that everyone should be doing. While the official inflation number says things are relatively calm, people say things feel much worse. Another RBI survey in September 2025 about general public's financial situation also was answered with not a positive response. The urban consumer confidence showed a current situation below the neutral level while the future expectations was much higher. Basically, people were pessimistic about today but optimistic about tomorrow. And honestly, that's a strange combination. It means people aren't saying their future is ruined. Yet, that's a very specific kind of financial pressure. And that brings us to the more important question that while inflation is stable and the basic necessities are being covered, what is happening to the money itself that the household savings fell so drastically? Basic economics says that the rise in inflation directly leads to the rise in household debts. But as we already established, that inflation is not the primary culprit here. Now, here is something that could make you uncomfortable. The RBI's financial stability report shows the rising debts of around 41.5% in March 2025 to 45% in June 2026. Now, it's unfair to say that the people suddenly became financially irresponsible. There can be many reasons why someone saves less in a particular year. But it does leave us with a much more interesting question. What exactly were people borrowing for? To answer this, an independent research institute established by the RBI, whose report shows the straight jump of 24% in borrowings from 2014 to 15 to 2023 to 24. That's not a normal shift. That's 6 times the share of new borrowing. And suddenly, the debt story starts looking a little different. While loans being taken for consumer durables like furniture, appliances, and other goods are growing much more slowly, the faster loan growth is coming from personal loans, specifically personal consumption. And this is where we can say that the debt increase and the less household savings makes much more sense with the subconscious convenience fee you have been paying all your life. Think about it. Your expenses include not just rent, groceries, but also a lot of conveniences like 50 rupees delivery, 90 rupees subscription, most of whose payments are minuscule, making them easy to ignore. And that's the trick. One fee is not going to make you poor. The problem is what happens when thousands of such small transactions become normal. And food delivery is one of the easiest places to see this happening because the price you see is not just the price of the food anymore. That's a whole ecosystem sitting between you and the restaurant. So let's take something very ordinary here. You order food worth 500 rupees. By the time you pay, that 500 rupees may no longer be 500. There's a delivery fee, a platform fee, a service fee, and suddenly the food wasn't the expensive part. Getting it conveniently was. Any food delivery platform keeps to itself a certain cut of the transaction called the take rate. Take Zomato for example. In one quarter, the disclosed take rate increased by almost 33%, increasing their revenue up to 41.5% in just one quarter, and roughly a third of transaction value being retained by the platform in the name of convenience. On their earnings call, CEO said that Gold membership pricing was kept much lower than what they wanted to be because members compare prices and can switch platforms when their membership comes up for renewal. While their margins improved from 6.6% to 7.1% in that very quarter, attributing the profits to a platform fee for everyone, including Gold members. Before we could say that the platform fee got bigger, we might be missing out the full story here. While the 15 rupee or 20 rupee platform is the receipt that is visible, the take rate is the money making machine which lies underneath. When a delivery fee appears on your bill, the person riding through the traffic to bring your food to you is not necessarily getting that money. In fact, the platform's own economics shows that it can retain a large share of transaction while the delivery workforce carries much of the operational risk and has a very little financial cushion. Niti Aayog estimates India's gig workforce could grow from 77 lakhs to 2.3 crore by 2030, and around 90% of gig workers unfortunately have no savings. The platform gets a flexible workforce. If there are few orders, the workers earn less. If costs go up, the workers absorb it. If the work slows down, the platform doesn't have to carry the cost of employing that person. And that matters because the cheaper the operation can make the delivery side, the more room there is to make money somewhere else. And this isn't just Zomato. Almost all of the food delivery platforms we see are doing the exact same thing. But it wasn't always like this. Before there were platform fee, all platforms started giving out entire things for free, except for food of course. Massive discounts, cashback, credits, and others among the many incentives. The goal wasn't really to make delivery permanently cheap. That would make no sense, but to make the habit cheap enough that you stop thinking about whether you needed the service at all. Making profits is any company's goal, and they are absolutely rightful in doing so. But the goal wasn't owning your money, but more of owning your behavior. Making the platform your daily routine, addicting to it. Hooking you to the convenience was the actual game. We kept looking at the price increase as an individual event. 10 rupees more here, 10 rupees more there, a new subscription, a new convenience fee, a higher commission, a higher, slightly more expensive renewal. But put all of those together and something changes. You're no longer paying for the thing once. You're paying a little bit over and over again. And this is where the engineered part of the story lies. And there is an evidence that this early discounting wasn't simply neutral competition. A Rajya Sabha Parliamentary Standing Committee examining the e-commerce found that deep discounts offered to preferred sellers were selectively funded by the platforms alongside concerns around non-transparent search rankings, and platform control visibility. And that changes how we look at those old discounts. They look like competition from the customer side, but someone was deciding where those discounts went. The platform could decide who got the discount and who got the visibility. That matters because the cheaper the platform could make the experience in the beginning, the easier it was to get people to use it and get you back for the next orders. But once everyone is on the same few platforms, you guessed it right, monopolies and duopolies emerge. And this is where the CCI's 2020 market study became important. It found that three large players dominated the online food service category, having set up platform parity clauses that could discourage restaurants from moving away from a common commission rate without having to prove that companies are fixing prices. A paper by a few researchers modeled how two-sided platforms set commission structure that gives the platform the most profit and also be the one that leaves consumers and workers with the least surplus. If changing a certain commission makes the platform more profitable, the incentive is already there. Another research from National Bureau of Economic Research found that when a platform has access to consumer and merchant data, it can increase its market power and make it harder for new competitors to enter and even hurt the customers by unfairly boosting its own products in search rankings. For example, it has been claimed that platforms show their own store brands as best sellers in shopping and push their own delivery kitchens to the top of food delivery. And this is where the problem becomes difficult for a regular consumer. Because if you don't like the price, you should be able to leave. But historically, any behavior change in an individual has not been reversed, be it social media, subscriptions, or any other things which could be considered addictive. And once you see it, you'd start to understand what engineer actually means here. The platforms, they first had to build the market first. They gave away discounts, funded promotions, made delivery cheap, got customers and restaurants onto the platform. And once enough people were there, the economics changed. The same convenience that was once being subsidized is now being monetized. That's the engineered part. But the system was built in stages for over years. First build the habit, then build the network, then monetize the network. And once the network becomes large enough, leaving it becomes harder. So the question is this actually a tax? Not legally. The government is not collecting it and you are not forced to pay it. And you still can choose not to use the platform. But there is one reason I think the comparison makes sense. A tax takes a small amount of your money from a transaction. This does something similar again and again. A small fee, a commission, a membership, a delivery charge, a service charge. Each one is small enough to ignore. But when you repeat the transaction hundreds of times, the amount stops being small. And that is what makes convenience different from a normal one-time expense. So, inflation may be under control, but that does not automatically mean your money is also under control. And that changes how you should think about the cost of living. The next time you see a 20 rupee convenience fee, don't just ask the hike in prices, but also question your frequency of utilizing the platform. Because 20 rupees once does not matter much. 20 rupees every week is different. 20 rupees for every week for 5 services is different again. And when those small payments become permanent, they start changing what you have left to save. The point here is not deleting every delivery app. Convenience does have real value. Sometimes paying someone else to save you an hour is completely worth it. The important part is knowing what and how many times you are paying for it. Because a business does not look at a single 20 rupee fee, but rather looks at millions of customers making millions of transactions every single day. And maybe that's the biggest lesson from this entire story. We started by asking why everything feels so expensive when inflation is under control. The answer wasn't one company and one fee. And it wasn't simply that people forgot how to manage money. The bigger change happened underneath was convenience became a business model and monetizing every part of it. So the next time you hear inflation, remember that inflation is only one part of the story. Look at your savings, debt, recurring payments, and most importantly, look at where your money goes after you spend it. Because your bank statement doesn't tell you what you bought. If you know how to read it, it tells you what kind of economy you are living in. And that's the part nobody puts on the receipt.